Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I'm your host, Marc Guberti, founder of the Content Marketing Plaza, bringing you 3 new episodes each week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. And before we jump into today's episode, let me ask you a quick question. How much would your life change if you could make 6 figures from your content? Imagine being able to quit your 9-to-5 job, do what you love for a living, and spend more time with your family. That's what we help our students do at the Content Marketing Plaza, an 8-week program that will help you build your way to 6 figures via your content. You can learn more about the Plaza by heading over to contentmarketingplaza.com, which will be in the show notes. All right, let's jump right back into the episode. If you want to take your business to the next level, you need delegation. This is something that really comes up a lot on Breakthrough Success, and it seems to be one of the themes of highly successful people. So if you want to get to that next level, delegation is the way to go. Today's guests, that's right, we've got co-guests for this episode. They are going to be talking with us about that. They are the CEOs and co-founders of BELAY, which is a staffing company that serves businesses all over the U.S. They are also both authors who help their readers build successful brands and thrive in their careers, while very importantly, being able to spend time with family in the process, so you don't have to sacrifice family to get career or vice versa. The focus will be on delegation, but I'm sure we're going to hit on a bunch of those other themes as well, because they do relate to delegation in some way. But regardless, today's guests for episode 323 of the Breakthrough Success podcast are none other than Bryan and Shannon Miles. Bryan and Shannon, it is such a pleasure to have both of you on Breakthrough Success.
Thank you. We're excited to be here. We appreciate the opportunity, Marc.
I feel like I need to cheer after that intro. That was energizing.
Well, hopefully by the end of this episode, we give the listeners something to cheer about. I know we've got a lot of knowledge between the 3 of us to create that experience for the listeners. So I'm really looking forward to diving in on the delegation. Before we do that, though, can you talk a little bit about BELAY and the backstory about how that got started?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, BELAY is a staffing company because it can be really hard sometimes for organizations that are growing to find great resources. So we come in to provide professional virtual assistants, bookkeepers, and website specialists so that the leaders can get back to doing what they do best and what they love. So we love working with people who are growing organizations in that way. But Bryan and I started the company in 2010. We were both working for separate organizations and always wanted something of our own. So we had this concept of providing virtual assistants domestically, which had been done internationally for a while, but not a real front runner leader in the domestic space. So that's really kind of where we got started, and that remains, one of our core offerings today. There's just such a need for amazing assistants that the business just continues to grow in that regard.
I mean, I definitely agree with that. There's such a very important need for having the right assistant, because one of the fears of delegating is that you hire the wrong person and then things aren't the way they were beforehand. Things are a little worse. Maybe something gets deleted or something like that. Or you got to micromanage, and then at that point you might as well not do the delegation. So how can we go about delegation and finding that right person?
Well, I think it starts, Marc, with looking through the lens of what an assistant really is. Our best clients are the ones that actually see their assistant as an extension of who they are, and not just as some secretary. That there's this sense of when I'm working with this person, they're my work alongside partner. And so by doing that, kind of your perception as a leader of your assistant helps you basically help them accelerate the productivity that you need to accomplish. And I think that's true, in terms of trust for other employees in any organization. The more you can help them understand their place and help them understand how they impact the bigger why of your organization, the better. But it really does start with the leader's mindset to kind of grease the tracks on a really great working relationship with your assistant.
And you need to have a lot of assistants who, I mean, you're telling them what to do also to be able to build a successful company. I mean, they're really helpful for a 6-figure, but I feel like when you get to 7, 8-figure and beyond, the assistants become absolutely essential for you to reach those kinds of levels. And I'm wondering if you can just share a little bit about what it's like to build an 8-figure company and some of the background that goes into that.
Sure. Well, a lot of it is really as leaders, for Shannon and I as owners really of our company, we carry a mantra kind of between the two of us that we want to own our company, not run our company. So we have this mantra of own, not run. And what that really means practically on a day-to-day basis is we're finding great people that can do the work, and then we basically delegate or ask them to take care of it, and then we resource and equip them and get out of their way. That's been part of scaling our business from a very small company to where it is today, working with thousands of customers. It's just it's an iterative process of giving more of yourself away and keeping only the stuff that only you can do as a leader. And there's a lot of great people out there that actually want to take stuff off your plate, and in most cases, they're actually probably better at it than you are.
And I mean, the more people you hire, like if you're listening to this right now and you have never delegated, you're thinking, how can anyone do my job better than I can? When you hire people, you figure out very quickly, it's like, oh wow, like there are a lot of people who can do some of the parts of my work better than I can. And I mean, that's definitely what happens when you do find the right people. And I mean, with the delegation, I mean, it opens up more time. I mean, I like that idea of owning but not running. I feel like this hits on the self-care theme because that extra time definitely gives you the ability to do extra things. But I'm wondering if we could go a little deeper into that self-care aspect. I know this is something that Shannon specializes in. She also has a book called The Third Option. So I'm wondering if you could talk about how we can practice self-care as we continue to grow our businesses.
A lot of it is a mindset of realizing you can have it all. You just have to define what all is, but you can't necessarily do it all. And so, for Bryan and I, at the very beginning of our business, we started out with a 5-hour-a-week assistant because we knew that in order to grow and scale the company, it couldn't just rest on our 2 shoulders. And so having that mindset of, really knowing where you should value your time, what your time is worth and where it's best spent, it's probably not on those low payoff activities. So I know when we talk about self-care, it's usually in the sense of like, go take a bath or, have dinner with friends or take a walk outside. And those are all amazing things and really practical self-care tips. But I also think there's an element of really looking at your time and seeing what the value is and where your time is best spent. I think that's an important part of self-care as well.
And it's really, I mean, self-care has so many different areas, but it boils down to how you want to spend your time. And it's interesting you mentioned that you started with a 5-hour-a-week assistant. I mean, some people, they think I got to keep expenses really tight. I have to do a lot of the work myself to prove the concept, demonstrate that I'm all in on this. So I'm wondering if you two can share that experience with hiring that first person, and just for people also who are listening who think that this is an unnecessary expense, essentially tell them why they should do the delegation now.
Well, I think when we first got started, we knew that we wanted to create something of meaning. And the truth is, nothing really great. It takes more than one person to do that. And for us, we knew that we were onto something, but all we could do was afford an incremental assistant, not a full-time assistant. So we just slowly started and built that out. And today, that assistant is actually now the COO of our company. So we've grown significantly since those early days. But it was the emphasis was on how do we stay focused on what only we can do. And over time, as your organization grows, you get to a place where you say, hey, we need to move to be more specialist in our roles versus general practitioners. Our team needs to stop wearing so many hats and really get focused in on the role. And when we did that about 3 years into our company, we hit an inflection point. We grew rapidly because everybody was really in a seat that they could stay focused in. But in the early days, assistants help you do that. They help you stay focused on the higher payoff activities that you should be doing as a leader versus those lower payoff activities. The notion that it's an unnecessary expense or it's a luxury is said by those who've never actually worked with a really great assistant.
And I don't know if you find this in your communities, Marc, but like what we've seen is it's very rare that somebody who has the vision to start a company or create content or, they're big picture thinkers. And so the actual details of what it takes to get the job done isn't often their gifting and often not where their time should be spent. And so it's very rare when you find one person who can do all the things, have the idea, set the vision, and execute on every element of it. And so I think it's just a matter of really knowing yourself and where your time is best spent and where you're getting energy out of the work that you're doing and providing the most value.
And I mean, a lot of really interesting points. It's definitely not a luxury, as Bryan mentioned. And I mean, we have to also get clear on what parts of the process do we delegate and who gets each of those parts, because you don't want to hand off everything you do to one assistant, because then that's a lot of different things that assistant has to do. Not everything may get covered. And I mean, we hit on the expense. It's definitely an investment in your business, and it's definitely a worthwhile investment. And with that in mind, I'm wondering, what do you believe holds most people back from being really successful with delegating and being able to scale it up?
I think the biggest fallacy we see is that people don't start with really clear expectations. They do kind of what you mentioned, like just give everything over or way too much all at once without a very clear set of expectations about what it looks like and what winning looks like. And then I think when they hit the first bump at the road, they're like, oh, I guess this isn't for me. When the reality is any new employee, whether you're in an office together, or they're full or part-time, like you're going to go through iterations of giving over things and teaching and training and mistakes made and corrections. And you kind of got to view it through the long view. So that when that first bump in the road hits, you're able to overcome it instead of just throwing the whole thing out.
I also think that leaders that are wanting to delegate and have a lasting working relationship that really works with a virtual assistant or an assistant on site, even, it's giving them, delegating to them the why more than you do the what and the how and the when, because the why is the end result. This is what's expected when we delegate. This is what the result is. And when you withhold the why, but you tell them the what, when, and how, they always need you around to fill in the blank. But if they know the why, they can fill in the blank when you're not around. And, in most cases, we're all working with great adults that care. And so for them, it's something that you're treating them like an adult. You're communicating that you trust them because they know the why behind the delegation of it. And I think that a lot of leaders, they start with all the how, the what's, and the whens, and they fail to really articulate the why for what their work is.
And those are some really interesting insights. The first one, I mean, you have to set expectations for what the success, what winning looks like to you, because without that kind of an expectation, then what are you really measuring the results on? And also really being there for your team, giving them that why. And I like that idea of being there for the team. It's definitely something that I agree on. But then one of the things that people hear about often is micromanaging. So how can we balance being there for the team, because obviously you want to support, without being on top of them for everything they do?
We really encourage our clients to delegate the results and not just the tasks. And so what I mean by that is, let's say you have an event that you are working with an assistant on. So the result is, let's conduct a successful event, and you give the assistant a lot of freedom to figure out how you're going to get there. Like Bryan said, starting with the why this event is important, the vision that you have for it, what you're hoping to accomplish with it. But then giving being there to answer questions and set checkpoints and guide points along the way, but really giving the assistant freedom to figure out how to execute on that. We've seen that as the most successful approach. Because if you have to delegate every single task, or if you have to micromanage, then it's, to your point earlier, you could just do it yourself. Like, it takes more time, right, to explain it and follow up. So we really encourage a fair amount of guidance and direction, but then also a lot of freedom and autonomy on how to arrive at that destination. And it can be tempting to, if there are mistakes made, to take things back. But micromanaging is demeaning for everybody. It's a time suck for the manager, and it's such a morale killer for the team member that you're working with. So I think setting those clear expectations and the long-term vision for what you see having accomplished, and giving a fair amount of freedom on how to get there, and being available along the way can help overcome that.
I think to just add to what Shannon said, from my perspective, whenever I get asked a question about micromanaging, I just think it's a short-term play for a leader. It's not sustaining. In fact, micromanaging is exhausting, and it's not a winning formula for building a team that you're looking for meaningful results. Mm-hmm. So, this notion of, well, I like it done my way. Well, fine, communicate that in such a way that the result is expected versus the things day to day. It doesn't matter that they use a pencil versus a pen to execute on something that equals a bigger result. It's things like that leaders need to work on maturing themselves to build a meaningful team, to create great results.
And it's interesting that you mentioned, I really like the insight from Shannon, how micromanaging, it's not just something demeaning to the assistant, but it's also demeaning towards yourself. You could be doing the work, you're watching someone else do it. It takes a lot of time. So micromanaging, it's definitely something that we shouldn't be doing, but it's not just something that lowers the assistant's morale. Something that could also lower our morale and obviously take a lot more time than necessary. And to achieve the level of success that the two of you have achieved together. And it's interesting that you do it together as husband and wife, because this is a great story of a family business, because some family businesses, this is very smooth, is what I'm trying to say. So what would you two say?
Never had one fight over the business, never one disagreement. It's amazing.
that is truly amazing to hear.
Not true.
Not true.
What I do want to ask you too is, can you share with us some of the habits that you have developed that you would consider essential to your success?
Well, yeah, on a working with your spouse, there's a few habits we've created in that regard. The first is that we have weekly meetings that are standing. We've got a lot of moving parts to our life and to our businesses, and it's important that we stay synced up on our leadership, our calendars, what's important to us. And so for the longest time, we've had standing meetings as a couple and also as co-CEOs for Ballet. We definitely see that as a habit. We also make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and our bodies. So we're pretty consistent in terms of our health. And we also make it a habit as a couple to make sure that we've got date nights planned and things like that are important to have a meaningful connection relationship-wise outside the context of a business. I've met husband-wife teams that don't do that, and you can see them suffer from time to time because they don't put emphasis on other things outside the context of their business.
When we started the company, we'd been married, 13 years? So we had, a history of working together through, parents dying, moves, having children. Our kids were 2 and 5 at the time. And we just have such a great deal of respect for each other that we knew that no matter what happened in the business, we were going to be okay as a couple, that we weren't going to completely lose ourselves, our relationship, and our family in the business. And so I think starting with that foundation, it's helped us navigate points along the way where we haven't seen eye to eye, or we're very different personalities. So we would approach situations differently, but not assuming that one person's right and the other person's wrong, because there's no playbook for business, right?
Right.
So just really having that mutual respect as a foundation. And then when we hit, challenges along the way, always going back to that so that you can work through it from the same side of the table, looking at the problem together.
Wow. I mean, those are really deep insights. I mean, obviously with any husband, wife, like they go through a lot together. And I'm sure like it doesn't take too long to see that or recognize that. But it's interesting how, I mean, you two make room for the personal side and you don't let the business like take over the dynamic of the relationship. I'm wondering how you're able to split those two things, because I feel like it's tempting, like especially when a business is in its startup stage. How do you find that time where it's personal and not just all business?
Yeah, I won't lie. That was a really intense season. I don't think we mentioned this, but not only did we quit our jobs at the same time to start the company, but we cashed in our 401ks and took a 50% pay cut. So we were all in on this thing, and it was stressful when we got started. I mean, we had a lot of eggs in this basket. And so the conversations that we had in those early days about the business were exciting and, new challenges, and we were enthusiastic and green, but it was very, very stressful. And there would be moments where we'd have to just give each other space and say, I can't talk about the company right now. Like, I just want to sit down and watch TV, like don't ask about the financials right now. And that needed to be okay. Certainly 8 years in, our conversations are much different, and we don't have that same level of anxiety or intensity. But we talk about the business all the time. We love it. It's an important part of who we are and what we've done. We talk with our kids about it. But I think it's also, on the other side, recognizing when that other person needs space to say, I just have to turn my brain off for a while. Like, can we talk about this tomorrow?
I also think that our target as a couple is not our business. I mean, it's part of it, but, also being a great parent is important to us. Also, having a great marriage, because we believe that's the best gift we can give our kids, is part of our target. And really, our target is a vision that's 20, 25 years out as a couple that includes a business as a portion of that. So the aim for us as a couple isn't, a really great successful business. The aim is, here's what our marriage looks like. Here's what our relationship looks like 20, 25 years from now. And so when you take the long view on what's important to you, the other things kind of sort themselves out when you work together as a team.
Wow, it's certainly inspiring. I mean, like, you two have really great chemistry just listening to you in this episode. And you two do a lot of different other things. I mean, it's not just Ballet. I mean, Bryan and Shannon, they both have their own books. Virtual Culture, that's Bryan's book, and The Third Option being Shannon's book, which will both be in the show notes. I'm wondering if you two can also recommend each one book that you believe will have a positive impact on us.
Well, I'll go first. I tell this book that anybody that's starting a company or is a founder to an organization, a really great read for you is called The Founder's Mentality. Because what happens is, as a founder, as your business continues to grow and you bring in people to kind of oversee your business or run your business and so forth, you get this weird feeling like, is the business still representative of what my heart was when we created this company? And The Founder's Mentality just nails that book. And it also helps those that maybe are not the founder really understand the heart of a founder and what's important to them. So anybody who's a founder, I highly, highly recommend that read called Founder's Mentality.
And then for me, can I do two? I'm going to be indulgent for a second. So sure. The first for me is Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. That was pivotal in my ability to grow the business beyond myself and feel like I'm enough and need to not limit the potential here. So that was transformational. And then the second and much more practical is The Advantage by Pat Lencioni. We use a lot of those principles at Belay that have helped us scale.
Bryan and Shannon, thank you both for sharing those book recommendations. Those will be in the show notes, marcguberti.com/E323. You can also see a bunch of book recommendations that I've made in the past, that past guests on the show have made. You could go over to amazon.com/shop/marcguberti. That link will also be in the show notes of this episode. And before we wrap up this episode, Bryan and Shannon, I've asked you both a bunch of questions throughout our time together, but what do you two each believe is one question that we need to be asking ourselves more often?
Are the stories that we're telling ourselves true? I work with a lot of leaders that they create self-doubt in themselves because they're holding on to a story that's actually crap. It's actually not true. And it's important that we take a moment in our lives to listen to the stories we're telling ourselves and really validate what's true and what's not. In most cases, the stories you're telling yourself are not true. And when you realize that, you kind of break through that, there's freedom on the other side of that, and there's a lot of opportunity, too, that comes with that.
That's a good one. I think mine would be why not? I think we ask ourselves why a lot, like, why should we do this? Why shouldn't we? Just why not? Just experiment more, play more, try new things. That would be my suggestion.
Bryan and Shannon, thank you so much for sharing those great questions and all of your great insights throughout our time together. If you guys want to learn more about Bryan and Shannon, you want to see what they're all about, go over to Ballet, which will be in the show notes. Their books also, The Virtual Culture and The Third Option, those are in the show notes as well. Are there any other places we can go to learn more about you as well?
We're pretty active on social, specifically on Instagram. We share a lot about our stories and our experiences running our companies. I'm Bryan Miles, BryanMiles on Instagram, and Shannon K Miles, K the letter K, not K A Y.
I don't know who that crazy Shannon Miles is, but Shannon K Miles, find her.
Well, we will definitely include both of your Instagrams in the show notes. But once again, it was such a pleasure to have both of you on this episode of Breakthrough Success.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's great to meet you.
Thanks, Marc.
Want to dominate the podcasting industry? Now you can with your free copy of my book, Podcast Domination. You'll learn how to launch, grow, and monetize your very own show. And whether you are a beginner or an expert, this book has a lot of golden nuggets for you. We'll cover the cost of producing this book. All we ask is that you cover the shipping. To get your copy, head over to marcguberti.com/PD.